Is it scary being the Neon Crew podcast? Yeah, it is. Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the Neon Crew podcast. My name is Kyle, and unfortunately, Mac is not here with me. What could this mean? Well, fear not, because our episode on us discussing The Watchers, as well as Mac's recommendation of Sorcerer by William Friedkin, is coming out. Unfortunately, we had to delay the episode because Mac and I are very busy people, especially in the month of July, apparently. So we had to make the decision to push the episode back. So that will come out 2 weeks from when this comes out. So we'll be back to our normal schedule. And also, I should mention, too, this is not going to count as an official episode of the Neon Crew podcast. This is mostly just bonus content being put in place of the main episodes that would have come out. So when our episodes discussing Ishana Night Shyamalan's The Watchers and William Friedkin's Sorcerer gets released, we will count that still as episode 76. So this is not episode 76. This is not episode 75.5. This is sort of just its own thing with just yours truly in place. So today, for this episode, we're going to be discussing Longlegs from director Osgood Perkins as a 2024 American horror thriller film starring Micah Monroe and Nicolas Cage. Now, I'm going to structure this episode in 3 different parts. The first part, which is going to be the shortest part, is going to be going over my movie theater going experience. The second part is going to be my thoughts on the film, surface level sort of stream of consciousness, without spoilers. And then the final part will be my thoughts on the film, including spoilers. And I'll let you guys know ahead of time when that will be. So those are going to be the different parts of this discussion, and I will say right now from the get-go that this episode is more than likely not going to be a typical episode length. You're not going to see a 2-hour timestamp mark on this when it pops up in your feed, but I'm going to try to make this no shorter than a half hour, just so that there's a little bit of something for you guys to chew on. And hopefully my thoughts on this film will carry that time forward. I'm going to try to not be overly long or long-winded, but I am going to try to be as detailed as I can, providing my perspective and opinion on this film. So let's get started. First up, my movie theater experience. I went and saw this at the Cinema Carousel in Muskegon. Shout out to them. I saw the 7:20 showing. I think I got out at about 9:15, so roughly 2 hours. It was in Theater 10, which for that movie theater is one of the bigger ones. It's actually one of the first 2 to come up because they have it structured weird. It's like, oh, there's Theater 1 on one side and Theater 10 on the other side. And both of those, when you first go in, are the bigger movie theaters that specific chain has to offer. So I was kind of surprised when I discovered that, because I didn't think that this would be in that big of a movie theater for people to go experience. But I was pretty happy finding that out, because bigger theaters means more rooms for my long legs to stretch out. And it was fairly comfortable. Their seats are pretty good. They're not the best seats that I've ever had in a movie theater. I think that honor would probably go to Celebration Cinema GR North in Grand Rapids. Specifically when I saw Old Boy the couple times that I did when they were showing it over there, those seats were very comfortable. It was like every single one was a recliner. And also the AMC in Grand Rapids when I saw Banshees of Inisherin a couple years ago. That was quite the pleasant experience. But the seats are good. People started trickling in. I was one of the first people to show up, naturally. I try to get there early if I possibly can, just in case my car starts fucking up, or if, there's a long line, if there's a lot of people going to see Inside Out 2, because it's making like every single dollar in the universe. But I got there fairly early. People started trickling in. There was more people there than I expected there to be, but by no means was the theater full. It was, I would say, a little less than half capacity. But it was still encouraging to see as many people watch this film as there were. This sort of more indie style oriented horror film that's very stylistic and elevated, especially compared to a lot of modern horror outside of, your A24s, your Neons, your occasional Blumhouses, whatever comes out. So I was worried that people were going to talk or laugh throughout this film. I was told by a coworker, shout out to Drew, he'll be on the podcast someday, I promise you, that people were laughing at certain moments of his showing of this movie, specifically when Nick Cage would come on screen, which I'm not entirely surprised about, because Nicolas Cage is just a ridiculous actor altogether, in all the best ways possible. I mean that as a compliment. But I was worried that that was going to happen with my showing, and that it was going to frustrate me and take me out of the film. And thankfully, that really wasn't the case too much at all. I must have gotten lucky when it came to drawing this ticket from the lottery spinner, because most everybody in my theater was pretty respectable. The only thing that I can think of that I was a little bit annoyed by was the fact that it seemed like most everybody who had candy that they brought in decided to start opening the candy as soon as the movie started, which, I mean, it'd be one thing if it was like a balls to the walls action movie and there was noise and cars and explosions and shit going on all over the place and it was noisy as fuck. But the fact that this is a quiet, meditative horror movie for a lot of the film, especially at the beginning, is a little bit frustrating when all you can hear is like, candy wrappers being open and whatnot. But that quickly subsided because, they were open after like 5 seconds. But after that, it was good. The movie ended, and I think most people just kind of silently got up and walked out. It's not too unsurprising, or it's not too surprising, I should say. These types of movies, especially the more artful horror films from one of these studios, typically leaves that kind of reaction with most general audiences. I got the sentiment that people were expecting this to be scarier than it actually was, which, I mean, I don't necessarily blame them for thinking that, especially since the marketing of this film sort of leaned more into, this is going to be one of the scariest movies you've seen in a theater ever. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think that the lack of scares or the inability of a movie to frighten you to your core, if it's a horror film, is a knock on the quality of the film itself. I think that despite the fact that this movie wasn't the scariest movie I've seen in theaters, it still is super well made, and it does the genre justice. I think that despite the fact that I personally wasn't that scared, it's still a pretty good horror film. So let's get into this movie. That's a good segue to talk about Longlegs. As I said earlier, directed by Osgood Perkins, who, if you don't know, is the son of the guy who played Norman Bates in the original Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Anthony Perkins is his name. So, written and directed by Osgood, stars Micah Monroe, who in herself is kind of a sort of scream queen, sort of up and coming. I say up and coming, but she was in It Follows, which came out 10 years ago, damn near. She must have been pretty young when that was released. And she was in Greta, Watcher, Significant Other, and most recently this movie. And I think, spoiler alert for my thoughts on her, she's fantastic in this movie. And Nicolas Cage Micah Monroe plays an FBI agent. She plays Lee Harker, and her task is to hunt down Nicolas Cage, playing this serial killer whose moniker is Longlegs. That's his signature. That's sort of like his Zodiac 7 autograph that he leaves at the end of every crime scene. And so this is a film that is very much of the ilk of a lot of different popular films that have come out within the last few decades. A lot of people compare this to Silence of the Lambs, since this is a female FBI agent who is hunting down a serial killer. It's mostly grounded in reality, but there's sort of this heightened sense of genre that comes with it. It's not just like a typical crime thriller. There's a lot more going on than that, obviously, with it being a horror film. And I don't think that those comparisons are too unfounded. I mean, I think that there is sort of a clear inspiration from Silence of the Lambs with this, especially when you think about the main character's relationship with the killer, how it all ties together, how there's sort of a storied history there instead of it just being happenstance. And I'm not going to give anything away, but I think that there is a little bit more to the comparisons and the inspiration going on with this in Silence of the Lambs. That being said, I'm also going to invoke Hereditary, because I don't think I've seen a movie since Hereditary in the horror genre, for the most part anyway, that's framed as well as this movie. And I'm going to get into the technical aspects of it later, but basically what I want to get across is, to me, there are 3 clear movie inspirations that this film kind of branches from. The first and foremost being Silence of the Lambs. The second one being Hereditary, mostly with just the technical aspects and the way it's shot. And then the third one being Zodiac, with probably some Seven dashed here and there. Basically, David Fincher's DNA, kind of recognizable in this particular movie. So yeah, I'm going to reference those 3 films probably throughout. So just letting you know, I'm not going to spoil any of those movies. I'm just going to make comparisons, maybe talk about what this movie does right, maybe what it doesn't get quite right. But this is mostly a discussion of reference. I really do enjoy this movie. This is one of the better movies I've seen in theaters this past year. I thought it was really good. I don't know if I could say I absolutely loved it, but I would for sure watch this again, especially in a theater setting if I'm able to, and see if there's a little bit more that the movie does for me in terms of connectivity, effectiveness, really immersing myself within the situation and the characters, and sort of being able to pick up on other things that I might have missed before. So this is a film that, like I said before, is shot super, super well. I think that's one of the most notable parts of this movie, is that it just looks damn gorgeous. And I'm not just talking about the cinematography. Who did the cinematography? It was Andres Aroki. I hope I pronounced that name correctly. If I didn't, please let me know. But this is a film that I think is one of the better looking films that has come out within the last few years, especially within the horror genre, because I think when you think about horror in the general sense, when you ask someone who's not much of a moviegoer, what do you think of when you think of horror movies? They'll tell you, oh, jump scares, big monster, sort of like the ghost rushing down the hall towards you. And this movie does have a few like jumpy moments in it, but I wouldn't say that this is a jump scare filled movie. I would say this is more of an atmospheric, again, I'm going to incite Hereditary, but it's one of those films where you watch it and you're unnerved simply because of how it's shot and how it's lit, and the fact that the setting of it is very open. You're going to watch characters in this movie in houses and in open areas and the outside, but it's also going to feel claustrophobic at the same time. It's shot in a very wide lens, and I'm going to get to the aspect ratio a little bit later, but the way it's shot, where you can kind of see the entire room in a lot of different points in this movie, is just really fantastic. Not only do you get a sense of the environment, but you also get a sense of unease, because you're just wondering in the back of your head, is somebody going to walk into frame of this? And is this going to be like a sort of like, are my eyes playing tricks on me in the dark sort of thing? Kind of like Skinamarink or certain parts of Hereditary, like I said before. I apologize in advance if I keep invoking that movie too much, but it is a fair comparison, I think. I also really like the music that accompanies this. I found out earlier that the music was done by a gentleman called Zilgi, who happens to be Osgood Perkins' brother, Elvis Perkins. So I guess with a name like Elvis, you're destined to go into music. So that's pretty nice. So yeah, I really like the music. I thought that was really well done. I didn't mention before, but I should mention now, this film was distributed by Neon. Neon seems to be sort of making a name for itself, kind of rivaling A24 in a way, in terms of being the one to introduce more grounded indie film, kind of like horror films, surrealist films that are kind of like right up my alley, you know. And I'm really respecting the kind of movies that they're bringing into the theaters. And I recently learned that they are going to be distributing Chris Stuckman's movie, Shelby Oaks, which is pretty baller. Good for them. I am excited to see this, and I'm excited at the prospect of seeing a movie from Chris Stuckman in theaters. I know that he's been trying to get this made for a while, so I'm excited to check it out. I've always enjoyed him as a content creator and as a film reviewer on YouTube. I think he's really got a passion for it, clearly, and I think that at the very least the film will be entertaining. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. But back to Longlegs. What else can I say about this movie? The acting is incredible. I think that obviously Nicolas Cage, when you cast him in your movie, you're going to get Nicolas Cage energy, whether or not that's for better or worse. And I definitely think that this movie is for the better, in that he's able to play this character in a way that's unnerving, but also he just kind of seems like a loser. Like, you're scared of him and you're scared of what he could possibly do, but at the same time, you also are just really sort of disgusted by him in a way that doesn't seem cool. It's not like there's an allure about him that makes him the most mysterious. It's not like in David Fincher's Zodiac, where you're trying to figure out who this guy is, or in Seven, where it seems like this guy is always like one step ahead of the police and they have trouble keeping up with him. No, this guy is like a degenerate loser scumbag, and Nicolas Cage plays him really, really well. But I really do think that the standout performance in this movie is from Micah Monroe as Lee Harker. I think that she is incredibly good in this movie, just being able to exist in this space that is between absolute crippling fear and sort of like timid determination. I love the way she plays this character, in that there's a confidence about her, while also not sacrificing the fact that this is a character that is just terrified in almost every situation that she's in. I kind of described her acting as this character, performing as this character, sort of like how a cat would play it, in that they're very smart, they're very slick, and they know exactly what they're doing. But at the same time, there's like a skittishness about this character. They don't let too many people in. She is very skilled in her job. She's very good at what she does. And it doesn't really stop her from doing what she needs to do, despite the fact that she's facing a lot of situations that would cause crippling fear and anxiety in high tense, high stress situations. I thought that Blair Underwood was good as her boss, Agent Carter, and it's almost like he's sort of purposefully playing an 80s tropey version of like a boss cop, like the chief of police or something in a movie like Predator or something along those lines, in like a buddy cop movie. He's sort of playing it kind of like a Danny Glover thing where he's like, I'm too old for this shit. But it's comedic levity in a movie that I think benefits from it quite a bit. And I think the fact that he's able to play the character in a way that's compelling, very human, very understandable, helps connect you with Lee and the environment even more. I thought he was good. I thought Alicia Witt as Lee's mom was very good in this movie. I was very unsettled every time she was on screen, and she did a really effective job at playing her role. There's really not too much I can discuss without getting into spoilers. I will just say before I go into spoilers, sort of like the hangups that I have with this film, I do think that the end of this feels a little rushed. I honestly probably could have done a little bit more, probably 10 or 15 minutes of this movie, just to kind of like delve into the new implications of what we learn later on, and to really sit in the situation unfolding, because I think it does end a little bit abruptly, if I'm being honest. So I'm going to say spoiler alert from this point on, so you've been warned. Spoilers for the film Longlegs. So in this movie, it introduces an element later on that sort of flips the film on its head, in that you think you're watching something that's steeped in reality, when in fact it becomes a little bit more supernatural towards the end, with implications of satanic figure, Nicolas Cage's character sort of driving this kind of curse forward, using Lee Harker's mother as sort of a conduit to carry out these killings. And it's just a very good kind of twist in the movie that you're able to kind of like piece together and pick up on. And I think that's one of the biggest things about the plot of this film that I appreciate, is that there are a decent amount of things that this film does sprinkle through that really become relevant later on. And it's compelling. It makes you feel good about trying to figure this stuff out. It always feels like the movie is kind of like one step ahead of you in solving these things unfolding in these situations, and that Lee Harker is figuring it out in real time, where you're kind of able to just go like, oh wow, yeah, that's right. Like, you're sort of like one step behind her in the process, and that feels really compelling. And it helps that because Lee Harker is good at her job, it adds that sense of realism to the situation. But the fact that it does delve into that supernatural side of it, I am a little bit more mixed on. I was a fan of the revelation that Lee's mom, Ruth, was in on the killings. In fact, partook in the killings pretty hands-on, in a hands-on way, almost being directly responsible for most of the families dying. And I like that connection that Lee has with the killer, in that it helps feel like there's a dynamic going on. It's not just a disjointed, disconnected crime thriller where the pursuer and the killer don't have any relation to each other. It does make it feel a little bit more involved that way. Where my issue kind of lies is not necessarily with the introduction of the supernatural, but just how quickly it is sort of wrapped up. So Lee finds out that her mom is the one carrying out these killings, essentially, because Nicolas Cage is basically put a curse on her and her daughter, Lee. And he said, my mind is a little fuzzy and I'm coming off of work, so I might be a little bit brain melty, but just bear with me. If I remember right, Nicolas Cage told the mom, your daughter is going to die unless you carry out these activities for me. And what she has to do is she has to take these dolls that Nicolas Cage makes and bring them into specific family homes on either the daughter's birthday or like around the daughter's birthday, something like that. And she has to unveil the doll in front of them. And the doll is able to possess the family members and they all kill each other. And that's why Nicolas Cage is able to get away with these for such a long time, is that he's not actually in the same room when these are happening. There's no evidence of him being there. There's no DNA. There's no trace of him at all. So this revelation comes, and I'm behind this 100%. Like, I'm willing to fully believe this and get behind the idea that this is something that takes place in this universe. There is a little bit of element that this movie has where it maybe makes you think that, Nicolas Cage and Lee's mom are just crazy people and that they're just going and killing these people anyway, and that the police have done a terrible job of gathering evidence, and that's why they haven't caught either of them for so long. But this movie very quickly does go through the supernatural part of it, in that you figure it out probably 10 or 15 minutes before the movie ends. I would say 10 minutes more so. And then the ending sort of has to be rushed along. You have to have a final confrontation between Lee and her mom, going over to Agent Carter and his family, because earlier in the film they established that Carter's daughter is going to have a birthday party, and that's sort of foreshadowing this final confrontation where the family is going to be cursed to kill each other, basically by Satan. Because I think Satan possesses the dolls or something, and then they have to open the doll, and then Satan allows that to come through, and he possesses them, and they all kill each other. Where my issue is this final confrontation is really the only kind of stamp we have as an ending. And I think that if we had 10, maybe even 15 more minutes to kind of draw this out, make the situation a little bit more grandiose. And it's not like I want this to be a sort of crowd pleasing, yeah, fucking get it, type of build up or ending. But I do think that if there was a little bit more to offer there, I wouldn't have felt as anticlimactic of an ending as I did for this. When the film was done and it ends with Lee kind of looking down at the doll, unable to shoot it, and she's like, we got to get out of here, and then the credits come up. It does feel a little bit of a whimpery kind of ending. I feel like there could have been a little bit more in the way of the implications of this being a bit more impactful, if that makes any kind of sense. I just wanted there to be more. I wish there would have been more once we found out that there is a supernatural element to this movie, and that there's a bit more implication going on with the actions taking place. This isn't just steeped in reality now. The rules are a bit bent, they're a bit broken. Now we have to go back and deal with all this stuff with this new context. And it doesn't really feel like it delves that much into it and isn't as concerned with it as I would have liked it to have been. So just kind of lightly going over the plot of this, I do appreciate the ideas going into it as far as the ciphers and the clues left for the characters to discover. I will say I do feel like a movie like Zodiac or like Seven does it a little bit better, in that it really feels like when you're watching those films, you are also trying to figure out the puzzle along with the characters. Whereas this one, you're just kind of confident that Lee's going to get it. And I guess Zodiac is a little bit more like that than Seven. Seven, you're kind of a little bit more granted freedom with trying to figure out what's going on. But this movie isn't too concerned with that type of thing. It's more so just trying to establish a really compelling horror thriller film that's very atmospheric, very creepy, very immersive. And my opinion is, if you're going to introduce that type of element, maybe leave a little bit more breadcrumbs in there for us to really put the meat on the bone of the film and to sort of make it feel a little more well-rounded, if that makes any sense. Sort of add that element to it that really gets us into the crime solving of this movie. We can wrap this up pretty soon, but I do want to go over the marketing of this film. So this was a more guerrilla tactic style marketing, a little bit more like Blair Witch. I remember when the first sort of teasers for this film was coming out, it was just sort of like 911 recordings of a father telling the 911 operator, "That's not my daughter." And it was very effectively creepy, and it was one of the more interesting marketing tactics that I think I've seen done in a film, especially for a horror film, in quite some time. I do appreciate the fact that it strayed away from the cheesy and totally ineffective. I say totally ineffective, but it probably does get people to go see the movies. The strategy of, we're going to show people reacting to how scary this movie is in a movie theater, showing you like night vision video of these people throwing their popcorn and like being scared and shitting their pants. I do appreciate that it did not do that, and I think that that is a marketing trend that I'm hoping is dying or is dead. But I do like the marketing of this film, and I appreciate it because it does really feel like it is advertising what it is, which is a interesting, discoverable horror thriller film with really good atmosphere. To sort of wrap this up, if I had to label this right now, if I had to give it a rating, I would probably give this a solid 8 out of 10. If I watch this again, it might go up. I doubt it would go down, but I'm pretty confident in that rating for the movie and how I feel about it. So yeah, 8 out of 10, very solid movie. Definitely would check it out. Try to watch it in theaters if you can. Oh, I will say this about the aspect ratio. I do like how it was used to convey the idea of past and present. When it's in the past, it's more closed in, it's more boxed up. There's the black bars on the sides. Whereas when it is in the present of the film's timeline, it's more wide, it's open, there's no black bars. It's just very vast and wide-reaching. So I do appreciate it on that level, especially. Thank you guys so much for listening to this special version of the Neon Crew podcast. Our regular episode will come out 2 weeks from now, episode 76. So if you haven't seen Ishana Night Shyamalan's The Watchers or William Friedkin's Sorcerer, which was Mac's recommendation, be sure to check those films out before the episode releases. Thank you guys so much. You can subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. We also are on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Be sure to give us some 5-star ratings on both of those websites as well. Grab some Etsy merch. We got some t-shirts and a crew neck sweater on our merchandise page on Etsy. We also have a website, www.neoncrewpodcast.com. I haven't updated it in a while, so it's not going to have the most recent episodes, but you can still listen to it on there if you so desire. Thank you to Gideon for doing our music, and thank you to Lauren for doing our logo design. Shout out to Sam for doing the night call segments whenever he sends one in. And shout out to Mac. Even though he's not here, his contribution to the podcast cannot be put into words because he is a wonderful boy. And we hope to get back to you guys soon, and we're excited to discuss those films and to discuss more films. Mac, what do we say? Actually, Mac doesn't say anything because he's not here. I have to say it. WWTHD. Bye, everyone.